Alright, so welcome to another episode of the More Knowledge Show. Today is going to be different from a lot of our other episodes because this is going to be the much anticipated Flat Earth special where all we're going to talk about is the shape of the Earth. And I'm going to try to have stuff like this more often because, we're going to focus on a specific topic the entire time instead of just talking about things that are going on in our world. We're just gonna cover one topic to try to clear things up. A lot of times the topics that we choose are going to be stuff that is misunderstood by a lot of people or just not very well explained. And I think one of the things that is not very well explained is what are my beliefs of the flat Earth and why it makes sense to at least be skeptical of the shape of the Earth. And I've talked about this in the past, but I don't think I've really went through why this is, something that you really should believe. And I think when you really, if you sit there and think about it, I think that there's probably a higher probability of at least the Earth not being completely round as they tell us than everything that they're telling us is true. Because if you see how everything is approached, when you see their tactics of how they go about doing this, it's like, okay, well, if you're telling me the truth, then why would all these other things also be happening at the same time? But anyway, the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about what exactly are my thoughts about the shape of the Earth. Okay, because I'm not really a flat earther. All right, I've been on the Flat Earth website. I know what the flat earthers say, and a lot of the stuff they say is, it's pretty crazy. It's like the Earth looks flat, so it's flat, or it's something like that. Like they say that they emotionally feel that the Earth might be flat. Well, they emotionally feel that the Earth is flat. They claim to have evidence that the Earth is flat, and the truth is that these flat earthers do not really have evidence that the Earth is flat. But I respect the movement. I respect the movement because they're questioning this thing that everyone has just accepted without really asking any questions about why this is the way it is. People just accept it. You show them a picture and people just believe it. It's like, that's one of the biggest arguments for why the Earth is round is people say, have you not seen pictures of the Earth? I mean, that's such a ridiculous argument that's insane. Okay, because if that's the argument you're making, I mean, I could watch a Star Wars movie and they show me images of the Death Star. So does that mean that the Death Star actually exists in real life because I saw it in a Star Wars movie? I mean, the fact that people have been brainwashed to that level to where you could see just any image and just believe it if it's from the government, that just shows how much effort the government has actually put into getting people into this state of mind. Because in a normal state of mind, people don't think like that. You show them a picture, people don't just believe it. But when the government shows them a picture, people believe it. That shows that there's been actual attempts, there's been actual efforts put forward by the government to get people into this state of mind. It's not natural. All right, and that's one point that I'm going to make later on in the video. But anyway, but I respect the Flat Earth movement. I support the Flat Earth movement, but I'm not going to say I know that the Earth is flat or I know what the shape of the Earth is. The Earth might be round. I'm just saying that we should be skeptical of it. That's my point. That's why I say I support the Flat Earth movement, because they're the only ones who are willing to come out and really call this thing out and say, maybe it's not the way that we were told. That's it. I just respect the movement, and I'm skeptical of the shape of the Earth. And I think that, we can be skeptical about the shape of the Earth. We can be skeptical about many other things. So it's not just about the shape of the Earth. It's a much bigger issue. It's an issue pretty much about everything that we're told, about how our system works, how our world works. And if we can call these things out, we can really make some serious change. Like, seriously, like, we can, if we can figure out one thing, we can figure out many other things. So even if the earth is round, I wouldn't really say I'm wrong, because I'm not saying that the earth is definitely flat. I'm just saying that I'm not sure, and we should ask questions. But if I can accomplish the goal of getting people to ask more questions, then even if the earth is figured out to be round, maybe we can figure out some other things that is uncertain. And that's kind of the main goal of all of this that I'm doing. So I'm not trying to sit here and tell you I know that the shape of the earth is flat. I think it's a little bit crazy, but I support them. Okay, I support them because they're willing to ask questions. They're willing to start a conversation that many times, people just think it's too crazy to even have this type of conversation. But I really don't think it is too crazy to have this type of conversation. I think it's actually a legit conversation to have. And that's kind of what I want to start. I want to at least start the conversation. That's the goal. The goal is not to prove that the earth is flat. The goal is to start a conversation, which can lead to more conversations, which can lead to actual change. Maybe not just in the way we see space, but in the way we see our world as a whole. Okay? So that's the first thing I want you to understand. I'm not insane. All right? I don't know what the shape of the earth is. I've never been to space. I have no scientific evidence. Okay? I'm not going to sit here and claim like I do, because if I did claim that, then yes, I would be insane. But I'm not. All right? I'm just trying to make the point that this conversation is worth having. Okay, so my first point is about, the earth being round, but the earth potentially not being round, is that pretty much every argument about the earth being round really doesn't hold up very well. Okay, because if you ask enough questions, it kind of runs out of answers, and then people just say, well, the earth just must be round, okay, because the government's telling us the truth. That really what comes down to every argument. It must be round because the government said so. Because, if you ask someone why the earth is round, some people may just go with, have you seen images of the earth? And then, so those are kind of the low IQ people. Well, I wouldn't say low IQ, the misinformed, the people who aren't very informed about space. That's kind of their go-to response. And then there's the people who are informed. There are people who give you a long, detailed response. They'll give you all this scientific evidence about why the earth is round. They'll tell you all this scientific evidence. They can give you these long explanations, but then you ask them, who's your source? And they say, oh, my source is NASA. It's what NASA tells me. And it has to be what NASA tells you, because the government pretty much has a monopoly on space. The government basically controls space. Space is controlled by the government. Everything that comes in and out of space is through the government. And the only way to really make these claims, it has to be through the government. And when it comes down to it, the government has no incentive to tell the truth when the government has a monopoly on all of the flows of information that goes from space to our brains. They don't have an incentive to tell the truth, so they can manipulate that information into any way that they choose. And that's kind of my point. You have all the scientific evidence, is great, but it's not about the scientific evidence. It's about the source of your scientific evidence. Assuming the source is trustworthy, the source is telling the truth, then yes, you would be right. The earth is round. But I don't think that we've been given enough to really believe 100% that the source is telling the truth, when the source is the government, who has and is doing right now, lied to people. I mean, the government has lied to people to start wars. I mean, the government has been involved in conspiracies, all throughout history, and they've done a good job of hiding them, but it's existed. I mean, there's conspiracy that the government, purposely poisoned people during prohibition to make people not want to drink alcohol. And that was actually proven to be true. But, of course, you read a history book, you don't read about it. And you would think that, in history books, they would talk about a lot more about how governments have lied to people. But it's not proportionate. That's another point. It's not proportionate. Considering the amount of times that the government has actually lied and the amount of times you actually hear in a history book, it's clear that there is some manipulation. There's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of effort that is put into making sure that a certain picture is projected to us. So what is projected to us is not just, reality. It's messed with. It's messed with in a certain way to create a certain image in our brains to get us to think a certain way and act a certain way. It's obvious. It's what they do. So when you have an institution who acts like this, who manipulates things, who has manipulated things, who does manipulate things, who will continue to manipulate things in a way to make us think a certain way, in a way to control our brains, then why should you trust them when they tell you that the earth is definitely round? There may be a lot to hear, but seriously ask yourself that question. My next point is 565 people have ever been to space. Okay? And they've pretty much all been sent through the government. And if you think about how much technology we have, how much that we're capable of doing, why has there not been more private exploration? Why is there not more private space tourism? Pretty much, like, a lot of the attempts to have private space exploration have not been very successful at all, and any real attempts has been heavily controlled by the government. So that's another thing. It doesn't really make sense. We have all this technology. We have the capabilities to send so many more people into space. Then why is it not happening? It's clear that we are not afraid of technological innovation. I mean, we've innovated in so many areas. It was a time when not many people had smartphones. Now everyone has a smartphone. It was a time when not many people had cars. Now everybody has cars. It's stuff like this. We've done in so many areas, we've innovated when it comes to our technology to a point where, certain things have become accessible among so many people. So why, after so many years, why has space been stagnant? In the sense that it's not become more accessible to the public, it's not become more accessible to normal people. That doesn't make sense. That's not proportionate to the amount of technological innovation that has supposedly happened. Okay, after all of these years, we've innovated so long, but yet we haven't seen growth in the accessibility to space, and that is another sign that there is clear manipulation to make it so certain people can get into space and certain people can't. And if they're manipulating it to make it so certain people can get into space and certain people can't, or a very small number of people who can get into space, then we should ask questions. Why are they doing that? And the same institution that's doing that and is telling us everything about space, why should we believe everything that they're telling us about space when they're trying to make it so they control everyone who enters and everyone who goes in and comes out, and the flow of information? If they're working so hard to control these things, shouldn't there be a reason? I mean, I don't know. I think that's a good question, but no one ever wants to ask. No one ever wants to ask it. And it's clear that, when you start asking these questions, it really all comes down to, the entire argument for round Earth is, I believe the government. The government always tells the truth. And when you think about it on a historical basis, that's not true. So the entire argument for the round Earth is based on the government successfully brainwashing you into just believing what they tell you. So that's one of my points. And so another argument that I have for why the Earth could potentially not be round is, the fact that when it comes down to scientific experiments, one reason why I say that the government doesn't have to tell the truth is that there's nothing that I could do to really prove them wrong. Alright, if someone told me the temperature outside was 90 degrees, I could go outside and I can measure the temperature. Alright? And if it's 90 degrees, then I can confirm what they're telling me to be true. But if I go outside and it's 30 degrees, then I'm like, wait, you're lying. And then they'll be exposed as a liar. Then nobody would ever believe them again because they will lose their credibility. So they have an incentive to tell the truth because me as an individual, I can go out and I could prove them right or wrong. The government doesn't have that incentive. Okay, the government can tell you something about space and I couldn't prove them right or wrong, no matter how much money I had. I could have $1 trillion. They wouldn't let me into space. They wouldn't let me conduct my own space experiments. They wouldn't let me go into space and see the Earth for myself. At least not under their intense supervision. So I think that's another pretty good point because, people might try to cite all of these things and I'm like, listen, I can't prove that right or wrong, so why do you believe that? Why would you just believe something if you couldn't go out there? And a lot of people just don't think about that. A lot of people just do not think that for all these other science experiments, why do I really believe it? But then why do I also believe this? It doesn't make sense. It's kind of a contradiction. So I hold everyone else to this one standard, but I hold the government to an entirely different standard for what I believe that comes out of their mouth. And that gets to my next point. A lot of people ask, why would the government lie about the shape of the Earth? What reason do they have to do this? And I think that's a pretty good question. That really is, because they're going to lie about something. It's like, why would you just lie about something just to lie? It doesn't really make sense. And what I would say to that is the reason the government lies about the shape of the Earth, it's all mental training. Okay, well, now it could be multiple reasons, but I think the core of it is all mental training. They're mentally training you to just believe and buy into whatever they tell you. Because if you believe the government when they tell you that the Earth is round without really allowing you to go out and see for yourself, without really opening up space, they're going to close it off and just train you to assume what they tell you is true, then they can pretty much tell us anything else and we'll believe the same thing because our brain has already been trained to trust them. That's really what it's about. It's about keeping the trust in the government. That right there is how power is accumulated. That's power. Power is the ability to control people's brains. You can control people's brains with force, but usually that's not sustainable. As we've seen in many other countries, you try to control people with force, it gets to a point to where people just fight back, and you can't last. Or other countries fight you because they see what you're doing is just wrong. But if you can control people from the inside without them even knowing it, that is sustainable power. That is power that can last forever. That is the power that is power that can continually grow. And I think telling people that the Earth is lying to people about the shape of the planet that they live on, their home, and getting them to just believe this, is one of the highest degrees of mental manipulation or mental training that you could possibly do. And I think that is the reason for doing it. If they did do it, that is a good reason to do it. Another argument is that the government's never really been to space, and that NASA is just this thing set up to say, all right, so we're going to take all these tax dollars and we're supposedly spending it on space exploration, but it's actually going to somewhere else, or maybe it's going to fill our own pockets. And that's also possible. It's possible that we've never been to space and that they've just said, they make up all these things to make it seem like they've been to space and they really know what they're talking about. That's possible. That is possible. Once again, the government does not have a track record of telling the truth, but if you read history books, it seems like they do. So there's a major disconnect in so many areas. And, that's really the core of it. There's many disconnects. We have advancing technology. Technology is advancing, exponentially. Technology is growing. It's becoming more accessible. People are getting access to better things. But for some reason in space, while the technology has gotten better, the actual results haven't changed. Okay? That's one disconnect. That doesn't make sense. Space is... We have better technology. We have more capabilities to send more people into space. But it's not happening. Why is that the case? Another disconnect is the government has lied to us so many times, but is not projected to us through our history books or through what we're talked about in the media. That's another disconnect. So it's clear there's a lot of tampering going on, and it's tampering that we never really question. So that's kind of the base for the entire flat earth argument, is that there's obvious tampering. We have a institution that has a monopoly control over the flow of information, that has historically been known to tamper with information, that has tampered with markets, that has tampered with nearly every part of our society, but we're just going to believe them. That doesn't make very much sense. If you sit there and think about it, that doesn't make much sense. Once again, I'm not saying what the earth is definitely this or that. I'm saying it's good reason to be skeptical. And if you hear that and you're still at least not a little bit skeptical about what you're told, then I don't know if there's anything else to tell you. There may be no turning back for you. You may already have been completely brainwashed, completely turned into a zombie. And, it's sad. But my goal here is just to get you to open yourself up to a different conversation, to a different side of the story that has mainly been closed off. And that's my last point. And my last point is that anytime someone tries to bring up the earth might be flat, they get completely shut off to a level that's not seen in any of their argument. One person can say that they're Republican, or they can say that they're a Democrat. And while people may argue, people, they don't completely shut down your existence. If you say the earth is flat, you lose credibility as a human being on this earth. And that is not natural. Okay? You lose your entire credibility as a human being to the point where you have to just say, oh no, I'm just joking. That's what happened with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving came out, he said, I think that the earth is flat. Then the pushback he got was so strong, he had to come back and say, oh, it was just a joke. See, what the government's doing is they're not using force to enforce these ideas on us. They're using us to enforce these ideas on each other. It's very smart, but that's what they're doing. So now anytime someone says something like the earth might be flat, that completely undermines their power, because that's the basis of their power, of how they grow their power, and how they keep their control over our brains. So they can't let that happen. But what they also can't do is they can't use force, because that makes it too obvious that they're trying to hide something from us. So they use us as a weapon against each other. And we are letting this happen. We are letting this slip. If all we do is just start asking questions collectively, if we all just start asking questions, if we all just start changing the way we think, we can completely tear this entire structure apart and expose the very core of a lot of our problems that exist in our world and that make life miserable for many people. So anyway, so to conclude this whole thing, pretty much, it's as simple as this. The round earth argument is that the base of both of our arguments. The round earth argument is, I believe the government has to be telling the truth, and pretty much that. I believe the government. My argument is, I'm not saying that they're definitely lying. What I'm saying is, there is good reason to be skeptical. Alright? The government has lied before. They have an incentive to lie. And they've shown that they're very capable of doing it. They've shown tactics. They've employed tactics that would make you think that they could be lying. So, I'm saying that it's okay to be skeptical. They're saying that they must be telling the truth. So, I mean, I think majority of people would actually think like me, would actually agree with me that it's okay to be skeptical about what they tell us. But a lot of people, their brains have been messed with to where they think that they don't agree with me. But anyway, that's just what I believe. Well, yeah, that's pretty much what I believe. I'm not, once again, so y'all do not mess me up here. I am not saying the earth is definitely flat. I am saying that we should be skeptical. We should ask more questions because there's some suspicious stuff going on. That's all I'm saying. And my main goal here is to start a conversation. If one day, space does become more accessible, and we know for certain, because so many people have seen the Earth, that the Earth is definitely round, it's fine. My goal is not to prove that the Earth is not round. My goal is to start a conversation. My goal is to start a movement. So y'all, share this video. Try to get this out to as much people as you can. I'm trying to really get people to hear this message. I think that this is something that a lot of people need to hear, because a lot of people need to change the way that they think. They want real change to happen. Everyone wants real change to happen, but they're not doing the right things that are required to get change. If we want change, we need to change the way people think. Because if we change the way people think, we can change the type of actions that they take, and actions are what lead to results. So anyway, hopefully y'all enjoyed this episode. I'll see y'all next week. And by the way, I'm kind of quiet because I'm inside my house right now. So yeah, that's why I'm talking very quiet at the end of this video. Anyway, I'll see y'all next week.